Good evening, everyone. I am Victor Robledo. I'm the founding director of Startup Grind Monterey Bay. Welcome. At Startup Grind, we created a community of entrepreneurs who are interconnected with the global entrepreneurship community. We believe in helping each other. We believe in giving before taking. We believe in never giving up. And we are a community of friends. In this month, we celebrate powerful women that are leaders within their organizations. Without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Tara Long, the Vice President of Seagate. Everybody, please stand up and welcome her. Tara, welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Here at Startup Grind, we want to get to know you first. We want to establish a framework. Where did you grow up?
I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. With my mom and my dad, and there's 6 kids in my family. 3 boys and 3 girls. A little bit chaotic, but fun.
Were your parents in business? Were they entrepreneurs?
It's an interesting question. My mom was in the business of raising 6 kids, and as if that wasn't challenging enough, she decided that she wanted to get her master's while raising the 6 of us. My dad was actually a chemical engineer by training. He ended up getting recruited to go to Wall Street and actually analyze stocks that were chemical stocks. And then one of the things that he did when he was there is he noticed there was an inefficiency of the dissemination of information from the U.S. government to investors. And so I think today we really take for granted when the Federal Reserve Chairman speaks, we instantly know what he or she is going to say. But back then, when he started his firm, they would have couriers at the place in which they would hand out paper copies of the government speeches. And then he would basically have the couriers come back, he'd scan it and post it up to bulletin boards. So he built a firm on it, and he actually still has it today. My younger brother, Tim, works with him as well. So he became an entrepreneur.
So what are some of the things that you learned from your father in regards to business?
Let's see, there's always been a heavy emphasis in my family on education and the importance of education, but almost as important, if not more, was the work ethic. And when we were little kids, my parents used to, Saturdays and Sundays would be work days, and we'd, be shoveling or weeding, and we'd be like, Mom, Dad, this is crazy. All of our kids, all of our friends are playing at the park. And my dad would be like, this is why I had 6 kids. These are my labors. So, we always worked very hard. We were always encouraged to work as well. So we started babysitting pretty young, and, where my dad also required us to pay for certain things that we wanted that would be above and beyond what he deemed as something that a parent should provide a child. So, but which is one of the things that's funny, though, is that he forced us to go to private school. He didn't want us to go to public school. But he thought it was really important that we value that education, so we actually had to pay 25% of the education each year.
Wow. So as you were going to school, what are some of the activities that you were involved in while you were scholastics?
Well, it depends on which school, but
High school.
in high school, I did a lot of sports.
Oh.
I did, and I did student government as well. So I definitely very team-oriented sports, and even through college, that's always been a really important aspect of learning to work with people, to be in team environment.
What are some of the experiences that you've had in scholastics that has helped you to become a leader?
Well, it's interesting. I think one of the experiences that kind of shaped me dramatically was I thought I wanted to go into physical therapy at I went to Marquette University, and I was a freshman, and I took biology, and it was beginning, I don't know, introduction to biology, and it was a theater with 200 people in it, and we had the teacher speaking at the front, and every single class I would fall asleep. I would take no dose, I would do caffeine, it didn't matter, I was out cold. And that experience told me that that was not the right path for me. And I ended up going and taking an economics class. This was one of the required classes at Marquette. And I loved it. I was like, I get this. Like, people buying stuff, people selling stuff. So I think that really shaped my interest in really understanding the economy and business.
What was your first job at college?
When I graduated from college, I babysat for the summer, saved up $2,000, and I went to Europe with a friend of mine and ended up getting jobs. We lived in London.
Wow.
And I worked for a group of solicitors, which was a form of an attorney, and I was their billing clerk. So every time I would tally up the hours by their rates and, type out the bills and send them out. So it was a great experience. And then I traveled after that. Then I came back and I had to find a real job, and I found a job at my dad's economic consulting firm, which was also a very good experience.
Yeah. So after your experience there, the trajectory being a leader, when did that actually happen to where you had individuals that were working under you or that you had to lead?
I've always, I've been managers even at like the sub shops that I worked at. I've always had people that, I've worked with in teams. But I think, and probably out of business school, when I graduated from business school, I went and I became an analyst, somebody who started to rate stocks and put ratings out on companies, and that was the first time that I had a team, and a young team that I got to kind of coach and develop. But I even think today, I think being a leader is something that it's constant evolution, and you're constantly learning better ways to work with other people and to lead other people.
So during this evolution, what are some of the things that you look for in the individuals that you're leading in the form of strategies? What are some of the things that you look for in these individuals?
Bright, motivated. I think a really important thing for me is team player and collaboration, especially with the function that I have within the organization. It's important to me that people realize that we don't have a clearly defined job, and the people who are within the organization, the executives, the other divisions that we work for, they're kind of our customers, and it's really important that they have that attitude about trying to get things right and working hard to make people satisfied with what we're delivering.
So right now, you're the vice president of Seagate. What are some of the experiences that you have in working in Seagate that you can share with the audience members that are here and the audience members that are watching online in regards to strategy and corporate development?
Well, that's a big question. So, in terms of my experience at Seagate and kind of developing and growing to be a leader, I think one of the things that I've had to learn to do that doesn't come natural to me is becoming an advocate for myself and for my team. Recognizing your strengths and then being able to figure out how to articulate them so that people can understand, people who don't know you or don't interface with you can understand what it is that you do and what value you bring. It's very important. And then what value your team brings. And to constantly advocate for that team as well.
So when you're looking for these things within team members, is that the same approach that you use when you're looking at startups or potential companies that you're looking to fund?
It's funny because that question, you can have a lot of answers, and I would go back to when I was an analyst, and what I did was look at other companies and evaluate them. I still do that very much today. But it was funny because I had groups of people, and we all had different industries that we focused on, and we all had different methodologies in which we evaluated companies. One group of guys would look at the bathrooms, and they would go visit the companies, and if the bathrooms were in good shape, they're like, these guys know what they're doing. Another group of them would never invest in a company if the CEO was wearing jewelry. that was just there, you know. It was a long time ago, too. And it was in New York, I don't know, different place. But no, for me, I think it's really about the drive. It's two things. It's about the drive, and it's about the understanding of the market. So when I talk about drive, when you ask somebody what your exit strategy is, and they say, I want to be acquired, that's not a very motivating. I want people who want to build something and who might actually get acquired, but who are highly motivated to go out and build something, and not just to make money. So I think that's probably the first quality that I look for. The second quality that I look for is an understanding of the market. So what's really important, I think, and I've learned, is that new markets just don't develop, right? It's about a disruption, and it's about, we only have so much disposable income, you know, and what you have to be able to do is identify where the shifts are occurring in the economy that cause growth in one area and a slowdown in the other area. And it's so when you see people who are building companies who understand that dynamic, who understand it's not, you know, the internet isn't, you know, it's not just growing, they're understanding, oh, I'm in internet advertising, and what's driving that is there's this huge pool of advertising money that goes across all media, and what's happening is, you know, the internet is starting to garnish dollars from these other media, and how that's going to happen, and what the value is that the new solution is going to bring when you compare it to the old solution.
So is this a systematic approach to figuring this out with every company that comes to Seagate, or is there something else that takes into account as far as the showcasing of these companies that are driving this market and that are involved in these exit strategies?
Well, I think with Seagate, because we're a technology company, a huge component is also technology. So very often you can have an entrepreneur who is a technologist, who's very passionate about the technology, who really doesn't understand the market. It's not formulaic. We would definitely take a look at it, especially if it was an innovative technology that we're interested in. At Seagate, one of the functions that I do is we do all the equity investments for the company. And a strategic investor is a very different type of investor than a VC in terms of not only the way we look at investments, but also in the way that we monitor and we work with those companies. So, for example, when we look to invest in a company, it's not necessarily just because we think we're going to make 10x of return. It's because we think that technology is strategic to us in terms of it might be in storage or it might be in a substitution for storage that we think is really important for us to understand. It could also be a potential company or a potential area that we want to go into in the future. We want to think about it as a hedge to possibly buy that company in the future. So that's, you know, from a strategic standpoint, that's what we look for. And so we try in my group to look at least 2 startups a week. And, you know, obviously storage and storage adjacency is our focus. From that standpoint, we also have become, we've kind of evolved in terms of our VC investing, our equity investment, whereas we've become much more active. Traditionally, we would do 1 or 2 equity investments a year. Now we are, in the last 6 months, we've done 5.
Wow.
So it's become very much an essential part of our strategy as a corporation to really begin to understand some of the adjacencies that are out there.
And in your experience, what are some of the up-and-coming markets that are interesting to you specifically?
So we are looking at video surveillance as a really interesting security, data security. We are also looking at big data. And then I would put big data and the Internet of Things in kind of a similar bucket.
Are there any companies that you've seen coming out of the Monterey Bay region that have that key emphasis and key focus?
I have not. I mean, we really focus a little bit more closer to the San Jose type area. We're located in Cupertino, so and it's interesting because we not only do we look domestically here in the United States, we also have started to become very active in Israel and looking at the technology in Israel because there's a lot of storage-related technology that is important to us that is occurring.
Israel, what are some of the companies that are coming out of that sector that are focusing on video surveillance?
Actually, the companies that we looked at in Israel, none on video surveillance, but what we've looked at is kind of next generation storage platforms. So looking at how to build with some of the new media, the new storage media that's available.
What kind of advice can you give to the audience members as far as the entrepreneurs that are here right now? If they would ever decide to build a business, and what would be the best way for them to approach a corporation like Seagate, whether it be for venture capital or whether it be just for advice?
I think giving some thought to why that strategic is right for you and being able to articulate that rather than just see them as a VC who has a full portfolio. You really have to think about why there is a match there in terms of what the company does. I mean, all big corporations do what Seagate does. So it's not just a Seagate. It depends on the technology or the area, if it's a Facebook or if it's a Google, or if it's a Cisco. You really think about what the right strategic is for the startup, who could help them, and then be able to articulate what your value proposition is to the strategic. One plug I would give for strategics is that one of the things that we do is we really look out for equity investment. We are not forced, we're not in a fund, so we're not as financially focused, especially on the short run. So if the company has some missteps or the valuation goes down, it's not a big deal for us as a strategic. In addition, I think we have teams of engineers, we have go-to-market channels that we use to help startups kind of mature and get on their feet. So it's a benefit that, I know VCs have a whole other set of benefits that they bring. It's just a different one. And what we see in a lot of companies today doing is they do a strategic plus, a couple of VCs as well, so they can kind of reap the benefits of all of them.
What's next for you? You're the vice president of this corporation. What would the next evolution of yourself within this corporation be?
One of the things that we've been working on as a group recently is strategy, and really helping to define what the strategy of the company is. And we're in a maturing industry, so if you look at what we've done, hard drive industry, it is very much of a mature. It is a picture perfect, consolidation, vertical integration play, and we've hit the point where we can't grow by buying our suppliers anymore, and we can't grow by buying other hard drive companies. So we need to figure out a way to continue to grow and enter new markets without that, with a different strategy. And it basically means going into new markets. And so that, I think for me, helping Seagate define what that strategy is and move into new markets is what's next. And it's not easy to do.
No.
You have a company that's done something historically for a very long time that's made them very successful. And what you have to do is think about the fact that continuing down that path is no longer going to necessarily deliver success. So you have to change, and sometimes changes.
With that, I'd like to open it up to the audience members for them to ask questions. Is there any questions?
Yeah, I heard a while back about quantum hard drives. Is that on Seagate's map? Have you guys been developing, or like, not necessarily quantum hard drives, but how was it? Light-based hard drives using like
Laser?
It was either laser hard drives or.
So we do, obviously,
Like
really
optical.
focus on, yes, optical.
Yeah.
Right now, we're actually looking at startups in the optical space. We are not, I don't know for, what all of the activities on the engineering side, but we've primarily looked outside for that type of technology. And that's a really good idea. A good example of a startup that we would look at is somebody who's looking to innovate on the new types of storage and the new types of what we call rotating media or magnetic media.
Do you guys project because you're in the hard drive space, how much data, and I mean, big data is a big thing right now, how much data that we're going to have, and it is, like, I mean, with the Internet of Things, where all these houses will be connected, and they're all going to need storage because of everything's connected, and there's all this data that needs to be collected. Is that why Seagate's kind of looking for that type of stuff? Or?
Well, it's interesting because you can look at demand. You're talking about what the demand for data storage is,
Yeah.
and it is going through the roof. But what's interesting is you have to think about the supply, and then you also have to think about markets. So even though everyone's generating tons of data today, at some point it's going to get too expensive, right? Or you're going to say, what am I saving all of this data for? And so it's understanding the economics of the market and understanding at what point what the supply side is. What are the substitutes that you could use instead of a hard drive? I mean, optical, that's definitely a substitute for a hard drive. And so there's a whole optical industry that's starting to emerge that says, okay, as people's demand for this data goes up, what are some other form factors that could come in and start to satisfy that? In addition, you have new technologies that are coming in that are, what compression is the technology and dedupe is the technology that's saying, how do we reduce our demands on storage? So looking at demand, you're right, it's a really optimistic picture for any type of storage, but then you have to layer in some of the market forces that help you better understand kind of where that industry is going. We are still exploring. I think there's a complementary technology, or a substitute, I would say. It's called SSD, which is solid state drives, and that's made with a very different media as a semiconductor-based technology. We've chose to invest in that area through acquisition, but we've also done a bunch of equity investments in that same space.
Do we have any other questions?
Do you find that the strategic relationships are later in the stage of the startup or early in the stage of the startup?
It's a really good question because we tend to be more comfortable, because we are an VC, we tend to be more comfortable coming in at Series B or Series C type of a round. But we have, on occasion, we've invested in, even angel rounds or seed rounds. So we're not rigid or formalized on that, but we're a lot more comfortable doing an investment when you have a VC side by side, because it isn't a core competency at Seagate. We're not in the business of valuation. We'll do it, we'll lead rounds, but we're a lot more comfortable if we can go side by side with a VC who's going to be doing their type of due diligence, and we can layer in our expertise and our type of due diligence.
When a new technology like drones come out, does Seagate look at those industries and how can we get hard drives out into that industry, or is it kind of you just look at that stuff and go, okay, this is an emerging new technology, it's coming out, will it need hard drive space, will it need solid states, or is there going to be something that we're going to have to adapt to that new technology, like robotics and farming and all that kind of stuff, or space? I mean, now we've got SpaceX and all the other companies that are now getting into space, data in space, all that kind of stuff. How does Seagate approach that?
So it goes back to what I was talking about before in terms of change and redefining and evolving, is that traditionally Seagate has been, the highest volume product line for us has been PCs. So it's been desktops and notebooks. And if you look at what's going on in the desktop and the notebook world, you can see that not only is the demand for desktops and notebooks declining, but the level of substitutes that are replacing hard drives is increasing rapidly. So one of the things that we're struggling with as a business is how do we redefine some of the way that we look at the world? And we look at drones as a great one, robotics, virtual reality, are all different areas where we're trying to figure out. Automobiles, how do we evolve, and even surveillance is obviously, video surveillance is a huge driver of storage. And how do we make sure that we evolve drives as well as solutions that are adequately positioned to do well in those emerging types of opportunities? But also keeping in mind that the notebook and the desktop are still really important businesses to us, even though they're not going in the right direction.
I I got questions for Dave.
This is the
Yeah,
perfect.
I guess with other countries, what countries do you see? I mean, you mentioned Israel. Do you see any other countries where there's like data explosions, or, I mean, the U.S. I'm sure is a data hog, but are there other countries similar that are starting to expand rapidly and need lots of hard drives and lots of data?
I don't think we see any difference necessarily regionally in terms of the demand for hard drives. I think one of the areas that we're, as a company, starting to explore is to better understand the government and better understand at a federal level, at a state level, at a regional level. And you hear about police officers now wearing cameras around. Where do you think that, that's going to drive the demand for storage? So we really look to that to say, okay, how do we make sure that we're positioned as a company to be able to, have the go-to-market, because that's a very different go-to-market than what we have today at Seagate. And then how do we develop products that are suitable? So, for the U.S. government, we're looking at, we manufacture the bulk of our products in China. Do we need to rethink that strategy? Do we need to think about our presence in Europe and how we can, maybe lobby and become more of a name to the European governments than we are potentially today?
And so because of that, do you have different levels? I mean, I've only bought the consumer side, but is there like an enterprise and government side to Seagate where you've got super secure hard drives, I mean, very limited data loss that are geared directly towards governments or big enterprise, whereas the consumer, I mean, hard drives fail and stuff like that. But do you have that type of entity? Or
We do. So we look at we have markets, right? So the market you're familiar with, we would call our retail market. It's if you go to the Best Buy. The biggest market for Seagate is actually what we call the OEM market, and it's when it's selling into Dell, HP, and it's basically either selling into the consumer, the laptop notebook market, right, where they take a hard drive and they build a system and then they go put it in, you go buy it in a Best Buy, or they sell it to a corporation. Right? There is a huge commercial side to notebook and desktop. We also have another big group called enterprise, and that what they do, and that HP and Dell are still in there, and what they're building out are big storage systems for data centers. And so that's a huge business for Seagate as well. To answer kind of specifically, we have products that are encrypted, that are more secure than, say, what you would buy when you go to a Fry's or a Best Buy. And we also have higher performance. If you think about data centers and the requirements in data centers, they're very different than you or I at home working on our videos or our photos. And so we do have products. They're obviously more expensive products. They're more difficult to develop, and they have a lot more, different technology in them.
Hey, I'm actually visiting from Washington, D.C.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. My question for you, I have a small med tech company in D.C. where you touched on, you're looking into Internet of Things, big data. So as my background's in brand strategy, so as we developed this company, we also found that we were hitting a lot of consumer trends and market trends along the way. And for us, as a small company, it's easy to if we just turn this 90 degrees, we're right on this trend, and that means we make up this group along with us. But as a big corporation, how are the layers of decision making done at Seagate when you guys want to enter a new market or a new idea? How does that look? Is it a lot of research? Is it going with your gut? Or
Oh, gosh. At Seagate, it's a lot of research.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of analysis that goes into. It depends. If you're talking short term, you're really talking about product development. Or what are the products you're developing? Or to your point of the brand management, who are you messaging and what are you messaging to them? When you look longer term, it's not about a product. It's about identifying markets and trends and opportunities, such as drones. If we had known about the proliferation of drones, say 5 to 10 years from now, would we have developed products differently? I don't know if we would, but that we do spend a lot of time also thinking about that in terms of what's happening 3 to 5 years out that we need to start to learn about. And that's where we'll use equity investments again, and to learn about that ecosystem and to learn how we see how it's evolving and how we could potentially either develop, a business that markets and develops products for that, or how do we just develop products that can service those markets.
Yeah, I was imagining research would be the number one thing.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Are there any other questions?
I want to know how you transitioned away from working with your father to finding this new path, or different path.
I went to business school.
I mean, went to business school.
I went to business school. I went to the University of Maryland for business school, and yes, that's exactly how I did it. What was interesting was when I worked for my dad, I worked for institutional investors, and we basically, it was how do you better understand the government so you can be smarter about making investments. And this is when I got exposed to Wall Street. I got exposed to stocks, and I loved it. It was very, very interesting to me. And so I knew I had to go back. I was in economics, arts and sciences undergraduate, so I knew I needed, a little bit more heavy-duty financial skills. So I went, University of Maryland, and I remember when I started my second year, I was like, okay, you go to business school and then you get a job, right? And the career counselor was, no, you have to go find your job. Like, we don't find it for you. And so that was a huge lesson for me in resiliency. I spent tons of time on that Amtrak going from Washington, D.C. to New York for informational interviews. I met with lots and lots of people, constantly made phone calls, constantly sent resumes out. And it was the day after I graduated that I had my final interview with Lehman Brothers at the time, and then I got a job. But there was nothing easy about it at all. It was a tremendous amount of work. But I think it made me understand that, things are, especially in business, like, it's worth trying. Like, don't give up. And I think I still do that today. Like, you can say no to me, and I'm gonna try again. Or you know. I like to say I have a thick skin. So.
I have a question. So, if you have a lot of choices in front of you, and it sounds like, you did have to make a choice at some point, what direction, I mean, what do you go with as far as, like, where you're absolutely going to be successful? What are you listening to? Are you listening to your gut, or are you just going with reasoning, rationing?
It's funny. That's a really good question. I think I'm really scared when I do things. It's the risk factor it's kind of like an adrenaline rush, but you're also like, oh my God, am I really going to do this? This is crazy. But I'm usually scared, but I'm usually excited about the opportunity, and I think that highly motivates me to try and do, to really focus on it and do a good job. A good example is I worked at a financial institution, and we invested in a company. We actually bought a company in Carmel, California, which is how I made my transition from Washington, D.C. to Carmel. And I literally it was a happy hour at my work. And I was sitting with the COO at the time, and I was telling him how I thought it was such a great investment that we just did, and that we really need to figure out how we take the research that this firm did and we use it to influence all the investments that we make. And that wasn't the plan at all. They had just planned to kind of have it separate and, have it be a financial gain for us. And he looked at me and he said, so, you ready to go out there and run it? I was like, absolutely. Thinking about my poor husband at home, who I've been married to for 6 months, who screamed, I'm never moving again. And the fact that I had to go home and talk to him. But he was actually wonderfully supportive. And so that's actually how we got to California. But yeah, it's usually kind of going with your gut, but it's not, at least for me, it's never 100% sure. I'm never like, I can definitely be successful at it. It tends to be something that involves quite a bit of risk.
So what's your inspiration? Like, when you were a little kid, were you like playing corporate games? Or,
No, and Seagate's the first corporation I've ever really worked with. I've always been in financial institutions. I think Seagate is a unique company. I mean, again, I don't have the wealth of working for a lot of big companies, but I think it's the people and the integrity and the accessibility. I mean, it's just for me, it's a very motivating place to be and very rewarding. And I guess what motivates me is being able to have influence. Like, you think about powerful women. I don't think about it as power. I think about it as influence and being able to be able to, to inform and to influence the decisions that a corporation makes. And I really see that through strategy and through my role with our executive team on the strategy side. And that very much excites me.
So who inspired influence? How did you have a woman guru or that you were like empowered by?
No, I don't think so. I definitely think maybe my parents and what they've taught me and instilled in me in terms of a work ethic and ambition. I don't see anyone. I have tremendous mentors who definitely inspire me, and people who I work with on a daily basis who also inspire me. But I can't point to one individual that has been that source of inspiration. There's a lot of wonderful women who I would love to follow in their footsteps.
Can you mention one?
Let's see, Madeleine Albright is a phenomenal woman. I even look at Hillary. I look at, and obviously you're getting the DC slant because of the political nature. But I think even in Silicon Valley, there's a lot of women that we can look to who are very inspirational. The Meg Whitmans of the world, Marissa Mayer. I mean, there's some very powerful women here who could be inspirational.
Speaking of women, it's Female Founders Month. Do you see a lot of female-led startup companies in your role at Seagate? And if so, do you think there's a bias against them, for them, or is it a level playing field?
So no, I do not see very many female startups at all. And I think it's the double whammy of, I think it's very challenging for females within the startup community. But I also think storage is not known to be a very female industry. Hardware, I don't even have to go to storage, but technology hardware tends to be historically more male dominated. So unfortunately, I don't see a lot of women. The few that I do know, I know them well because I remember them. But unfortunately, I think it's the challenge of just being a woman in the startup community and then being in hardware as well that really limits the amount of women that I see, unfortunately. But I'd like to change that.
And how do you think we can change that?
I think it's twofold in that I think it's making sure girls and women today have the right training and they have the right inspirations and the right women to look at and say, I can go down that path. I also think it's figuring out how we change the bias in the venture community so that there are more women who are getting financing. And there's some great organizations out there that are doing it. Astia is one of them that's looking to figure out how to promote and encourage women entrepreneurs.
I was going to say too, for younger girls, I have 2 daughters. What do you suggest for getting them into that? I mean, I know I see one of them definitely kind of future engineer, the other more disruption.
Are you sure it's not their age?
It's been pretty standard for the whole time they've been growing up. But yeah, probably a little bit of the age. But I've been trying to get them. I built them a Linux computer so they can start playing around and everything like that, and trying to get them into computers because I mean that's where the globe is going, is in the cloud and all that fun stuff. And so I'm just wondering if you know anything for the younger women or future women, what they can do to get into this kind of entrepreneur side.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is to treat your daughters in the same way you would treat your son, right? In terms of math and science and electronics and don't think that they're only interested in certain things and expose them to as much as you can. And I think you'll see that they're going to develop their interests themselves. But definitely, I mean, I think it's wonderful that you are doing that and continue to encourage, the developments of math and science.
Thank you.
There are no other questions, I want to say thank you to Tara for coming. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And with that, feel more than welcome to hang out with us and chit chat a little bit more, but thank you so much, I appreciate it. So let's give Tara a round of applause.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, I know I've met you before.
Yeah, Jeff.
Jeff,
Nice to meet you.
thanks. Nice to meet you guys.